Rain pounded the streets of Seattle, a relentless gray curtain that turned the city into a watercolor blur. Ethan Caldwell stood under the awning of a downtown cafe, his tailored coat barely touched by the storm. At 38, he was the picture of success, a tech entrepreneur with a penthouse view and a life polished to perfection. But tonight, his hazel eyes scanned the street with a restlessness he couldn't name. He clutched a black umbrella, its handle cool against his palm, as if it anchored him to something real. Across the street, a woman struggled with a stroller, her thin jacket soaked through. A small boy, no older than 5, clung to her side, his sneakers squelching in puddles. Her dark hair stuck to her face, and she muttered something to the child, her voice swallowed by the rain. Ethan watched, his curiosity piqued. Why was she out in this mess? No coat, no umbrella, just a stubborn march forward. "Excuse me." Her voice cut through the downpour as she darted under the awning, the boy tucked against her. Her eyes, a startling green, met Ethan's. Could we borrow your umbrella? Just to the bus stop. It's right there." She pointed down the block, her voice urgent but soft, like she hated asking. Ethan blinked, caught off guard. He wasn't used to strangers approaching him. His wealth usually built an invisible wall. But her gaze held no calculation, just a mother's quiet desperation. He handed over the umbrella without a word, their fingers brushing briefly. Her hands were cold, calloused. "Thank you," she said, her smile fleeting but warm. "I'll get it back to you. Promise." She crouched to drape her jacket over the boy, who shivered but grinned up at her. Then they were gone, disappearing into the rain, the umbrella a black halo above them. Ethan stood frozen, the moment replaying in his mind. Who was she? Why did her gratitude feel like a weight? He shook his head, stepping into the cafe. Just a random act of kindness. Nothing more. The next morning, Ethan arrived at his office, a sleek glass tower overlooking Puget Sound. His assistant, Marla, greeted him with a coffee and a curious look. "Someone dropped this off for you," she said, holding out his umbrella. Tucked into the handle was a folded piece of paper, its edges worn. Ethan frowned, unfolding it. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. "Dear stranger, you saved us last night. My son, Max, and I made it home dry because of you. I know it's just an umbrella, but to us, it was everything. Thank you for seeing us. If you're ever at the Daily Grind on 4th, I'll buy you a coffee to say thanks. Claire." Ethan read it twice, his thumb tracing the ink. "You saved us." The words hit harder than they should. He pictured her green eyes, the way she'd shielded her son. He didn't need coffee. He could buy the whole cafe if he wanted, but something about the note tugged at him. He slipped it into his pocket, ignoring Marla's raised eyebrow. Claire Harper was no stranger to struggle. At 32, she'd learned to navigate life's sharp edges. A single mom since Max's dad walked away 4 years ago, she juggled 2 jobs, waitressing at the Daily Grind and cleaning offices at night, while raising her son in a cramped apartment near the city's edge. Her life was a balancing act. School pickups, late bills, and a smile for Max even when her heart felt heavy. But last night, the rain had nearly broken her. Max had been coughing, the bus was late, and her pride had taken a hit asking for that umbrella. Yet the stranger's quiet nod had felt like a lifeline. She hadn't expected to write the note, but when she dried Max off and tucked him into bed, gratitude overwhelmed her. The man didn't know her anything, but he'd helped. So she'd scribbled the letter, dropped the umbrella at his office, listed on a tag inside, and hoped he wouldn't think she was crazy. Back at the Daily Grind, Claire tied her apron, her mind drifting to the stranger. He'd looked out of place in the rain, too polished for the gritty streets she knew. Probably some corporate type, she thought, wiping down a counter. Still, his eyes had been kind. She shook her head, focusing on the coffee orders piling up. No time for daydreams. Ethan didn't plan to go to the Daily Grind. He had meetings, a charity gala to prepare for, and a life that didn't include chasing strangers. But by noon, the note burned a hole in his pocket. He told himself it was curiosity, not compulsion. As he stepped into the cozy cafe, its walls lined with mismatched art and the scent of roasted beans. The place was busy, but he spotted her instantly. Claire, her name tag read, pouring coffee with a practiced ease. She moved like someone who'd learned to make every second count. When her eyes met his, recognition sparked, followed by a shy smile. "You came," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "Didn't think you would." Ethan shrugged, suddenly awkward. "Your note, it was nice. I'm Ethan, by the way." "Claire." She gestured to a stool at the counter. "Coffee's on me. Least I can do." He sat, watching her work. She bantered with regulars, her laugh bright but guarded. Over coffee, she shared fragments of her life. Max's love for dinosaurs, her late-night shifts, the way she stretched every dollar. Ethan listened, surprised by his own interest. His world was boardrooms and contracts. Hers was survival and small joys. Yet her resilience drew him in, like a flame he hadn't realized he needed. "Max still talks about the Umbrella Man," Claire said, refilling his cup. "You're practically a superhero to him." Ethan chuckled, but her words stirred something. He'd built a tech empire, but when was the last time he'd felt needed? "He sounds like a good kid." "The best," she said, her eyes softening. Then a customer called, and she was back to work, leaving Ethan with a half-empty cup and a strange ache. Over the next week, Ethan found excuses to visit the daily grind. A quick coffee, a casual chat. Claire's stories about Max, his school projects, his stubborn optimism, chipped away at Ethan's polished exterior. He started bringing small gifts, a dinosaur book for Max, a scarf for Claire when he noticed her thin jacket. Each gesture felt foreign but right, like rediscovering a language he'd forgotten. Claire noticed a shift in him, too. Ethan wasn't like the men she'd known, selfish or fleeting. He listened, really listened, and his quiet kindness disarmed her. But she kept her guard up. Men like him didn't stay in her world. Still, when he offered to fix her broken stroller one evening, she let him, watching as he knelt in her tiny apartment, tools scattered, joking with Max about T-Rexes. "You didn't have to do this," she said, handing him a glass of water. "I wanted to," Ethan replied, his voice low. Their eyes locked, and for a moment, the air felt charged, like the rain-soaked night they'd met. But life wasn't a fairy tale. Claire's landlord raised the rent, and Max's cough worsened, hinting at doctor visits she couldn't afford. Ethan, meanwhile, faced his own pressures. A company merger loomed, demanding his focus. Yet he couldn't shake Claire's quiet strength or the way Max's laughter echoed in his mind. One evening, Ethan arrived at the cafe to find Claire distracted, her hands shaking as she poured coffee. "Everything okay?" he asked, leaning closer. She hesitated, then admitted, "Max is sick. I can't afford the specialist he needs. I'm figuring it out." Ethan's instinct was to offer money, but he stopped himself. Claire's pride was fierce. He'd seen it in her eyes that first night. Instead, he said, "Let me help. Not with money, with Max. I know a pediatrician, a friend. I can get you an appointment." Claire's jaw tightened, torn between gratitude and independence. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, but I owe you." "You don't owe me anything," Ethan said, and he meant it. That night, Ethan drove Claire and Max to the doctor. Max, bundled in a blanket, clutched the dinosaur book Ethan had given him. Claire sat in the passenger seat, her silence heavy with worry. Ethan reached over, squeezing her hand briefly. "He'll be okay," he said. She didn't pull away, but her voice was barely a whisper. "I hope so." The doctor's visit confirmed Max needed medication and rest, but he'd recover. Relief washed over Claire, and as they left the clinic, she turned to Ethan, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "You didn't just save us from the rain," she said. "You're saving us now." Ethan's heart thudded, the weight of her words settling deep. But as they drove back, a text lit up his phone, an urgent merger issue. He glanced at Claire, her face soft in the streetlight glow, and felt a pang. His world was pulling him back, and he wasn't sure he could resist it. Ethan's phone buzzed again as he pulled into Claire's apartment complex, the glow of the screen casting sharp shadows across his face. The merger text from his COO was blunt. "Board meeting tomorrow. Your absence isn't an option." His jaw tightened. The weight of his company, his empire, pressed against the fragile warmth of the moment he'd just shared with Claire and Max. He glanced at Claire in the passenger seat, her face softened with relief after the doctor's visit, and Max dozing in the back, clutching his dinosaur book. "You're saving us now," she'd said. Those words clung to him, heavier than any boardroom deal. Claire caught his glance and offered a tired smile. "You didn't have to drive us," she said, unbuckling her seatbelt. "You've done enough." "It's nothing," Ethan replied, but his voice betrayed a strain. He wanted to say more, to ask her to stay in the car just a moment longer, but the phone buzzed again, insistent. He silenced it, stepping out to help with Max's stroller. As they walked to her apartment, the Seattle night was crisp, the rain replaced by a starry sky. Claire carried Max, his small body limp with sleep, and Ethan pushed the stroller, its wheels rattling on the uneven pavement. At her door, she hesitated, her green eyes searching his. "You're not like most people I meet," she said softly. "Why do you keep showing up?" Ethan's throat tightened. He wasn't sure himself. "Maybe because you don't expect me to," he said, half joking. But the truth was in the way her strength pulled at him, the way Max's laughter echoed in the empty corners of his life. Claire's lips curved, but worry lingered in her gaze. "Good night, Ethan, and thank you." She disappeared inside, leaving him with the echo of her words and a nagging question. Could he really walk away from his world to be part of hers? The next morning, Ethan sat in his glass-walled office, the merger papers spread across his desk like a battlefield. His company, Caldwell Tech, was on the verge of $1 billion deal, but his mind kept drifting to Claire's cramped apartment, to Max's cough, to the warmth of her hand in his. He rubbed his temples, trying to focus. His COO, Rachel, leaned forward, her voice sharp. "Ethan, if we don't close this by Friday, we lose leverage. You're distracted. What's going on?" He wanted to brush it off, to slip back into the polished CEO role he'd mastered. But Claire's note, "You saved us," sat in his wallet, a quiet rebellion against his sterile life. "Personal stuff," he muttered, waving her off. Rachel's eyes narrowed, but she didn't push. Meanwhile, Claire was back at the daily grind, pouring coffee and dodging questions from her coworker, Jess, about the fancy guy who kept showing up. "He's just a friend," Claire said, wiping down the counter with more force than necessary. But her heart betrayed her, replaying Ethan's quiet gestures. The scarf, the stroller, the way he'd sat with Max at the doctor's office, distracting him with dinosaur facts. She wasn't naive. Men like Ethan didn't belong in her world of late bills and second-hand clothes. Yet every time he showed up, her walls crumbled a little more. That afternoon, Jess nudged her. "Your friend's here." Claire looked up to see Ethan at the counter, his suit slightly rumpled, a tired smile on his face. Her pulse quickened, but she kept her tone light. "Back for more overpriced coffee." "Best in town," he said, sliding onto a stool. "How's Max?" "Better," she said, relief softening her voice. "The meds are helping. He's back to begging for pancakes." She paused, then added, "We didn't have to do all that last night." Ethan shrugged, but his eyes held hers. "I wanted to." The moment stretched, charged with unspoken words. Then Jess called Claire to the back, breaking the spell. As Claire walked away, Ethan's phone buzzed again, another merger update. He sighed, torn between two worlds. Over the next few days, Ethan and Claire fell into a rhythm. He'd stop by the cafe after work, sometimes bringing a small toy for Max or a coffee for Claire's late shift. She'd tease him about his fancy suits, but her smiles grew warmer, her guard lowering. One evening, he showed up with a takeout bag from a diner. "Pancakes for Max," he said, grinning. "And maybe for you, if you're lucky." Claire laughed, the sound bright in the dim cafe. "You're spoiling us." "Maybe you deserve it," he said, his voice quieter now. Their eyes locked, and for a moment, the world shrank to just them. But the moment shattered when Claire's phone rang, her landlord, demanding the overdue rent. Her face fell, and Ethan caught the shift. "Everything okay?" he asked. She hesitated, pride warring with exhaustion. "Just bills. I'll figure it out." Ethan wanted to help, but he knew better than to push. Instead, he offered, "If you need a break, I can watch Max tomorrow." give you a night off. Claire blinked, surprised. You do that? For a superhero like Max? Absolutely, he said, winking. The next evening, Ethan arrived at Claire's apartment, a pizza box in hand. Max greeted him with a toothy grin, dragging him to a pile of dinosaur toys. Claire watched, her heart twisting. Ethan didn't belong here, in her world of chipped mugs and secondhand furniture. But he fit, kneeling on the floor, letting Max roar at him. She left for her night shift, a strange warmth settling in her chest. But trouble loomed. At the cafe, Claire overheard a customer mention Caldwell-Tech's merger, describing Ethan as a cutthroat CEO who'd do anything to win. Her stomach churned. Was that who he really was? She let him into her life, Max's life, but what if he was just passing through, a rich man playing a kindness? Meanwhile, Ethan was struggling. The merger consumed his days, with board members questioning his focus. Rachel cornered him after a meeting. You're slipping, Ethan. This deal could make or break us. Whatever's distracting you, fix it. He nodded, but his mind was on Max's laughter, on Claire's tired smiles. He didn't want to fix that. That night, Claire came home to find Max asleep and Ethan reading on her couch, a dinosaur book open beside him. He's a great kid, Ethan said softly. You're doing an amazing job. Claire's throat tightened. She wanted to believe him, to lean into the warmth of his words. But doubt gnawed at her. Ethan, why are you here? Really? You've got a big life, mergers, fancy offices. Why spend time in my mess? He stood, closing the distance between them. Because your mess feels more real than anything in my world. You and Max, you remind me what matters. Her breath caught, but fear held her back. I can't afford to trust the wrong person again, she whispered. Ethan's eyes softened. I'm not going anywhere. The next day, crisis hit. Claire got a call from Max's school. He'd had a bad asthma attack and was at the hospital. Panic seized her. She called Ethan, her voice shaking. I don't know what to do. I can't get there in time. I'm on my way, he said, already grabbing his keys. He left a board meeting mid-sentence, ignoring Rachel's protests, and drove to the school, then the hospital, where he found Max stable but scared. Claire arrived an hour later, breathless, her eyes wild with worry. When she saw Ethan sitting with Max, holding his hand, something in her broke open. He's okay, Ethan said, standing to meet her. Just needs rest. Claire threw her arms around him, tears soaking his shirt. Thank you, she whispered. I don't know what I'd do without you. Ethan held her, his heart pounding. For the first time, his world of deals and deadlines felt small compared to this, her trust, her warmth. But as they stood there, his phone lit up with a furious text from Rachel. You left the meeting? We're losing the deal. Fix this now. Claire pulled back, noticing his expression. You okay? He nodded, but the lie felt heavy. Just work stuff. She studied him, doubt creeping back. Your world's calling, isn't it? Ethan opened his mouth to protest, but before he could, a nurse interrupted, needing Claire's attention. As she stepped away, Ethan's phone buzzed again. He stared at the screen, torn. Claire's words echoed. I can't afford to trust the wrong person. He wanted to be the man she needed, but his empire was crumbling, and he didn't know if he could save both. The hospital hallway buzzed with quiet urgency. Nurses' footsteps, the hum of machines, Claire's shaky breaths as she stood by Max's bedside. Her son's small chest rose and fell steadily now, the asthma attack behind them, but fear lingered in her veins. Ethan's presence earlier had been a lifeline, his steady hand holding Max's, his calm voice cutting through her panic. But when she'd seen his phone light up with urgent messages, doubt had crept in like a cold wind. Your world's calling, isn't it? She'd asked, and his silence had felt like an answer. Now, alone with Max, Claire wrestled with the ache in her chest. Ethan had been there when it mattered, but could she trust him to stay? Across town, Ethan sat in his penthouse, the city skyline glittering through floor-to-ceiling windows. His phone lay silent now, but the damage was done. He'd ignored Rachel's texts, skipped the board meeting, and the merger was teetering. His COO's last message was an ultimatum. Show up tomorrow, or we're done. Ethan rubbed his face, exhaustion settling into his bones. His empire, years of grinding ambition, was slipping through his fingers. But all he could see was Claire's tear-streaked face, Max's tiny hand in his. For the first time, his wealth felt like a cage, not a crown. The next morning, Claire woke to Max's chatter about Ethan the superhero. She smiled, ruffling his hair, but her heart was heavy. She'd let Ethan in, let herself hope, but the customers' words at the cafe, cutthroat so, still echoed. Her ex had been charming too, until he walked away, leaving her and Max to pick up the pieces. She couldn't risk that again, not for her son. Yet Ethan's kindness wasn't like her ex's empty promises. He'd shown up again and again, with pancakes, books, and quiet strength. She pushed the thought aside, dressing Max for school. She had to focus on what was real, her son, her jobs, her life. At Caldwell Tech, Ethan faced a different battle. The boardroom was a storm of tense voices, Rachel's the loudest. "You've been distracted for weeks," she said, her eyes sharp. "This merger is our future, Ethan. What's more important than that?" He wanted to say Claire, Max, but the words stuck. Instead, he leaned forward, voice steady. "I'm here now. Let's fix this." For hours, he negotiated, placated, strategized. By noon, the merger was back on track, but the victory felt hollow. As he left the meeting, he pulled Claire's note from his wallet, her handwriting worn from his touch. "You saved us." He needed to see her. At the daily grind, Claire was mid-shift when Ethan walked in, his tie loosened, eyes tired but warm. Her heart skipped, but she kept her tone light. "Thought you'd be running the world by now." "Tried that," he said, sliding onto a stool. "Didn't stick." He paused, searching her face. "How's Max?" "Back to normal," she said, pouring his coffee. "Thanks to you." Her voice softened, but doubt lingered in her eyes. "Ethan, last night, you didn't have to stay. But you did." "What?" He leaned closer, his voice low. "Because I care, Claire. About you. About Max. I know my life looks different, but I'm not here to play games." Her breath caught, but fear held her back. "My life's a mess. Bills, hospital visits, me barely holding it together. You could walk away, no strings. Why wouldn't you?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "Because walking away would be losing something I didn't know I was missing until I met you." The words hung between them, raw and real. Claire's hands stilled on the counter, her heart pounding. Before she could respond, Jess called her to the back, and Ethan's phone buzzed, another work crisis. He silenced it, but the moment was broken. Days passed, and Claire wrestled with her feelings. Ethan kept showing up, at the cafe, at her apartment with Max's favorite pizza, even at the park where Max played. Each gesture chipped away at her walls, but trust was a fragile thing. She'd been burned before, and Max's heart was on the line too. One evening, as Ethan pushed Max on a swing, Claire watched, her chest tight. He fit so easily into their lives. But could she let herself believe in him? Ethan, meanwhile, was unraveling. The merger closed, but the cost was steep. Late nights, endless calls, and a growing distance from Claire. He felt her hesitation, the way she held back, and it stung. One night, he showed up at her apartment unannounced, a bag of groceries in hand. "Thought we could cook," he said, forcing a smile. Max mentioned spaghetti. Claire let him in, but her quietness was loud. As they chopped vegetables, Max coloring nearby, she finally spoke. "Ethan, I heard things about you. People say you're ruthless, that you'll do anything to win. Is that true?" He set down the knife, turning to face her. "I used to be. Built my company by being tough, focused. But that's not who I want to be anymore. Not with you." She studied him, her green eyes searching. "I want to believe you, but I've got Max. I can't take risks." "I know," he said softly. "I'm not asking you to. I just want a chance to prove I'm different." The turning point came a week later. Claire's landlord delivered an eviction notice. Her missed rent payments had caught up. Panic gripped her. She couldn't tell Ethan. Her pride wouldn't let her. But when Max got sick again, a minor cold but enough to keep her home, she missed a shift and the bills piled higher. Desperate, she called Jess, who let slip that Ethan had been asking about her. That night, Ethan showed up at her door, his face etched with worry. "Jess said you're struggling." "Claire, why didn't you tell me?" Her eyes flashed. Because it's my mess, not yours. I don't need saving, Ethan. I'm not trying to save you, he said, stepping closer. I just want to be here. With you. With Max, whatever you're facing. Let me face it too. Tears welled in her eyes, and she turned away, arms crossed. You don't get it. If you leave like everyone else, it's not just me who gets hurt. It's him. She nodded toward Max, asleep on the couch. Ethan's voice was steady. I'm not leaving. Not unless you tell me to. Claire's resolve cracked. She sank onto a chair, her voice barely a whisper. I'm scared, Ethan. Scared to trust you. Scared to need you. He knelt beside her, his hand hovering before gently touching her arm. I'm scared too. My life's been empty for years. Meetings, money, nothing real. You and Max, you're real. I don't want to lose that. She looked at him, tears falling. What if we're too different? Then we figure it out, he said. Together. The next morning, Ethan helped Claire negotiate with her landlord, using his connections to secure a payment plan. He didn't pay her bills. He knew she'd refuse, but he stood by her, his presence steady. Slowly, Claire let him in, sharing small moments. Cooking dinners, reading to Max, laughing over spilled sauce. Trust grew, fragile but real, built on quiet acts of kindness. Ethan, too, was changing. He delegated more at work, carving out time for Claire and Max. His penthouse felt less like home than Claire's cramped apartment, with its mismatched mugs and Max's dinosaur drawings. But challenges remained. Claire's long hours left her exhausted, and Ethan's work still demanded late nights. They argued sometimes, her stubborn independence clashing with his instinct to help. But each fight ended in apologies and learning each other. One evening, at the park, Max ran ahead, chasing a butterfly. Claire and Ethan sat on a bench, the sunset painting the sky gold. I never thanked you properly, Claire said, her voice soft, for not giving up on us. Ethan took her hand, his thumb tracing her knuckles. You don't need to. Just keep letting me in. She smiled, leaning against him. Deal. Their future wasn't certain. Claire's financial struggles lingered, and Ethan's career still pulled at him. But as Max ran back, giggling, they shared a look that held a promise. They'd face it together, one step at a time. If this story touched you, comment where you're from and subscribe to the channel.